I rise today to talk about something that is unseen, but that really impacts every aspect of our daily lives. Something that has major implications on the future of my state and many rural states just like yours, Mr. President, in your rural areas. And that is reliable broadband connections and the implementation of service in our unserved and underserved areas. Internet connection is something that we often take for granted. Certainly in the DC area we do, especially in our cities and our urban communities. It's a mainstay of so many facets of our life. So just think about it. We rely on internet connection for our communication with our family and friends, our emergency services, obtaining information. Oh boy, I've already been done that about 5 times today, getting some additional information. Banking, conducting business. And as we experienced firsthand during the pandemic, essential aspects of our workforce participation, the education of our children, and I'd add in healthcare here. Even as we transition back to in-person work and school post-pandemic, these capabilities are so essential and greatly beneficial. In West Virginia, our state is the only state entirely encompassed by Appalachia, and we're recognized across the world for our mountainous terrain. So we love our mountains in West Virginia. Our topography in West Virginia has dealt us a challenging hand when it comes to adopting needed advancements to connect people to the internet. So we know one thing, it's expensive and it's a lot easier said than done. But this lack of broadband connectivity and reliability is one of the biggest concerns that I hear every time I travel in the States. That's because our homes, our schools, our hospitals, our health clinics, our churches, our businesses, if they lack the appropriate level of connectivity or lack it entirely, you're behind. You're behind. You're not participating, you can't get the help that you need, you can't communicate the way you want to, and in a lot of cases, you're not going to live in a place that doesn't have connectivity. So this is something that must change and something that I'm committed to changing. So one of my first initiatives as United States Senator was launching my Capito Connect plan to help bridge this digital divide that we see in the country. The plan served as a roadmap for bringing affordable, high-speed internet connection and access to our homes, our businesses, and our classrooms throughout the state. Since launching this initiative, we've made a lot of progress. We have, connecting our communities in our state. We've had a lot of conversations, and really we've kind of bridged a lot of what we thought would be the impossible. We've expanded cellular service in Paw Paw, a very remote area, in Lincoln County, a very rural area, by initiating searches for providers. We've secured millions of dollars in broadband funding, investments through the USDA programs. And we've hosted multiple visits with our FCC officials to bring attention to our state's broadband needs. Increasing rural broadband has been something that is, increasing rural broadband funding has been a focus of the Appalachian Regional Commission. I've also supported major broadband builds like Zayo's announcement to construct a fiber optic network right through the north central part of our state. We've also been receiving critical feedback from listening sessions in all 55 counties, including soliciting all kinds of data back from folks in West Virginia onto our website. Also, when we were doing the effort for the bipartisan infrastructure law, I made sure, along with many others, that this was included because this is an essential part of our infrastructure, and we are making a difference. So we've made a lot of advances, we have, but there's still much more work to accomplish. And now's not the time to look back and see what we didn't do and how maybe we could have done it better. Now is the time to look forward to see where we are and where we're going to be. So we're at a really critical moment here, and one that we must take advantage of. We have all prioritized funding and provided funding for broadband in many different pieces of legislation. We've done that every year in appropriations, and I'm on appropriations, and I personally have made sure that we've included this not just in appropriations bills, but also in the bipartisan infrastructure package. So, on Monday, I was back home in West Virginia, got the chance to speak to some of the greatest young men and women in our state at Girls State, West Virginia Girls State, West Virginia Boys State. And it is clear in talking to some of them that our best and brightest are unlikely to stay in a state, our state, if they don't have this reliable broadband. It just doesn't make sense. The lack of internet connectivity will impact how they join the workforce, how they further their education, or perform the tasks of everyday living that have become so dependent upon broadband. So Congress has a needed, much needed, and very important role to play here. And I'm confident in our ability to rise to this occasion in the face of this challenge. But in order to distribute the unprecedented funding that is coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law to the communities and states that need it, we have got to have accurate data, and this has been a flaw in the system. That's why NTIA and FCC have been tasked with developing broadband, the national broadband map, to determine where the unserved and the underserved communities were located. Why is that important? Because much of the funding, as it should be, is not to up your service in an urban area or up my service in Charleston, West Virginia in a more, I would say, suburban type area, but it's to go to these unserved and underserved areas. We have to have accurate data. So with accurate data that we can work and then distribute those fundings as it should, as it's proper. There's no doubt that the first maps that came out in November were inaccurate. They failed to properly account for the connectivity needs. I know I can speak for my state, but I'm sure it's the same all across the country. And this is something that our state of West Virginia, we really took it personally because we know that this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to really get it right. So they invited challenges. They said, if you think that if you can identify a residence or a home or a business that is not that is shown as being served and you're unserved or underserved, then you can challenge the map to say that's an inaccurate recording of the status of my broadband connectivity. So we had over 120,000 challenges, of which 86,000 of these were accepted. That means they went back and looked, and working with our state broadband council, who's done a phenomenal job, they went back and looked and found that 86,000 homes or businesses that were recorded as being served in actuality had either no service or very little service, something that was considered underserved. So this is going to help us as the distribution of the larger sums of money come to actually provide the dollars to get to those places. So with these developments are encouraging, and the FCC will continue to improve this, and 2 future versions are being planned. The need for connectivity remains. Updated mapping shows that over 271,000 locations in my state now remain without service. And I think some people watching this would probably say, that can't possibly be that you don't have service. But if you get to some of these more remote areas, and sometimes they're not even that remote, you get out into some of the more rural areas where there's maybe one provider or not even no competition, you know, it's not an economic model to serve one home that's 10, 15 miles away. And so there are people, if I get a show of hands in classrooms in West Virginia, I get at least 20 to 30% of the students in those classrooms do not have good service. So think about doing their homework when they get home. They can't do it. Most of it relies on information that you get from the internet. And so it really puts those students, those families behind. While funding will be allocated by the end of this month, we have to make sure also that it's not wasted. Sadly, we've seen this happen in our own state in 2010. Money was wasted when our first chance came along to be able to connect more people. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that's why I have introduced the Rural Broadband Protection Act. It's a bill with broad bipartisan support that would improve government programs responsible for connecting people. and I look forward to marking up this legislation in the committee here soon. West Virginians have been persistent and diligent and honestly, I think, quite patient, but now very frustrated throughout the process. And they can always expect the same from me. However they're feeling is however I'm going to feel, because that's how you are as a representative. So I will continue my efforts for these broadband capabilities to go to that last house, that last home, that last business in this mountain state. We're on the cusp, I think, of a major breakthrough here. We're all on board on this, and one that I'm committing to see through. So with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.